Welcome to Just Mental Health News, your trusted source for making sense of today's mental health headlines in our world. I'm your host, Dr. Lindsay Tsai, a licensed therapist, and I do a lot of work in the field with mental health. And so each episode, I hope we can break down some trending news stories, emerging research, even some social media conversations, or cultural moments through a clinical lens, helping us move beyond the headlines to understand what they reveal about what's happening with mental health and people, relationships, and the human experience that we are all navigating through. And so today we're discussing the recent arrest of former Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum. And so I don't know if you all know, um, Andrew Gillum, a couple years ago, he ran for the governor's race here in Florida. But before we get into that, I want to begin this segment off by just giving us a gentle reminder. This episode, it's not about diagnosing anyone or speculating about what happened behind closed doors or what we see happening in the public eye. I don't know the facts beyond what has been publicly reported, but I will do my best to be responsible with how I use my platform in order to just really shed a light on this moment to broader the conversation about mental health and how they affect millions of people in your home, in your neighbor's home, across the world. And so, whether they live in the public eye or not, I believe people deserve respect as they're going through their circumstances. And so, let's get into it. And so Andrew Gillum, if you don't know, he is a graduate of Florida A&M University that is up there in Tallahassee, Florida. And so during his time there, from what I've read, he served in student government and he was very impactful on his campus. And so it followed his career that he had become an elected official in Tallahassee, where he was on the city commission. And then he later became the mayor in 2014, only serving one term. And so in 2018, this is when his career started to expand because he pulled one of the biggest upsets in Florida's Democratic primary as being one of the first and only to this day. Well, no, we have some candidates right now who are running for governor, but he was the first nominee from the Democratic Party that had been in this position, but then he lost to the general election to Ron DeSantis. And he was a former congressman himself at the time, but he lost by a slim margin, about, I want to say 30,000 votes. And so everybody was hopeful that was running for, that was supporting him, but was it just really like a lot of people were disappointed at the outcome. And so he was once viewed nationally as one of the Democratic Party's rising stars. I don't know if you've seen him and featured on different news platforms like CNN. He would be an occasional correspondent. But more importantly, his most recent role, I believe he's still working there now. He's a co host at the Native Land podcast. And this is a podcast where they talk about current events, the political world, and what's happening. And they're always encouraging people to be mindful of the elections and the importance of how local elections really inform, the big government elections. And so he's a co-host along the side of Angela Rye and Bakari Sellers. And so I followed him for some time. I used to, listen to Native Land podcasts once upon a time. Very good content. I was always impressed by, just their takes on different current events that are happening within the country, across the country, and always that call to action. And so, his public life, unfortunately, it has taken different twists and turns because in 2020, he was found in Miami, passed out in a Miami hotel. And after the incident, he publicly apologized and entered into rehab. And this shifted again his political career and never recovered. And so I just encourage you to read those stories for yourself. But the point that I bring us here today, and the reason why I want to have this conversation, because the story matters, because it's bigger than politics. The reason why I believe it's bigger than politics is because it reminds us that public success and private, sometimes things that people are navigating through privately, they often exist at the same time. Two things can be true at the same time. You'll hear me say this from time to time. People can be upfront, leading, they can be the face of a company, they can be the face of an organization, they can be the, a live streamer, a YouTube streamer, an Instagram influencer. But oftentimes, because we follow these public profiles from day to day, we see that, breaking news, whether it be from TV, TMZ or the Shade Room, that there's things that are happening privately in these individuals' lives. And so it's, incumbent upon many, just professionals, especially in the mental health realm, to just really like continue to support, our clients, and just set them in reality of, though, you see people publicly, people are, navigating through some private things, and it should be that, it should be private. And so the reality is, another thing is that people may assume that they have it all together, that the pastor has it all together, the news anchor has it all together, the president of the university has it all together, the celebrity in that hit show that you watch, or that influencer that you watch, has it all together, while at the same time they're carrying tremendous, pain, maybe emotional pain, maybe some loss, maybe some grief, maybe sprinkled in there. And so that's why I like, having these conversations, these open conversations, because it helps us to recognize, like, people's identity after they've had maybe moral falls or public failures, maybe the stresses that come from that. Oftentimes people may see the person taking that trip, going to, Bali, going to Thailand, but they don't see the burnout that led to that trip. They may see the high achieving person, but they may not see the depression they sit with. They may see everybody, photo perfect on Instagram, but they don't know the stresses that they carry, the emotional cost that it may bring them on a given day. And so I also want to highlight the stigma surrounding Black men's mental health. And this is very important because, he is a Black man. And so he's not only a Black man, but he is a public facing, Black man, young Black man, who has a family, who has children, who has a career. And so oftentimes, being in these spaces, it can create a lot of pressure, and we'll get into that. And so again, we can't conclude what led to this, this recent incident. What we can talk about today is how sometimes, think people that may have unresolved emotional distress, that may appear to have that chronic stress, or whatever the case may be, it often intersects in people's lives daily. And so I just got two therapist takes, two hot takes, and then I'm through. Two, and then I'm through, right? And so here's my first take. My first take is high achievers, people that are high achievers, can sometimes mask, whatever's happening in the background through the achievements that they're pushing through, or through, just their public persona, or just, being in the spotlight. And so one of the biggest misconceptions about mental health, if you didn't know this, is that sometimes, people may make this assumption that success means someone is doing well emotionally. So just because we may see someone socially, they have all the friends, but maybe they don't. Maybe that's just their social, the way they show themselves socially. There's this assumption that maybe because they're out on all these trips, people have all this money. I can tell you this, there are oftentimes I've heard where just because you may see people out and about, sometimes people are out there robbing Peter to pay Paul, or just trying to rub two pennies together, right? And so, the same thing could be with those that may be in high profile, or, high achievers. It can often sometimes be a coping strategy. And so some people sometimes keep that public persona, they may keep that work at a high level they may be having some things that are happening beneath the surface that may be very heavy to address. And so they become known for what they produce instead of who they are. So they become known for being the podcaster, being the influencer, being the pastor, being, the doctor, being the attorney, being the leader in their community. But oftentimes, there's something that is happening beneath the surface. And so it's great to get the promotions. It's great to get the accolades. It's great to get the awards. It's amazing to get the titles and to get the recognition. All of that can coexist, as I mentioned earlier, with loneliness. It can coexist with depression. It can coexist with substance abuse and also use, even with grief or unresolved trauma in some cases. And so the point is, achievement is not the same as healing. So though we're out there, becoming, successful in so many different areas, don't allow that success to get in the way of addressing what we may be running from or masking in order to just survive and show up, right? And so here's the question for us today: how successful are we? So let's internalize that. That's just not the sole question of what I want you to sit with, but the question is, how are you doing when no one is watching? I think, that's the bigger question. That's a more so personal, because it leads me to my second hot take, right? So we address individuals who are high achievers, high performers, and sometimes that could be a mask for things that are happening beneath the surface that individuals may be avoiding because it may be too painful to address it in real time. And so we wrap that up and said, not so much asking about their success, but how are you doing when no one is watching, when you're not at the job, the 9 to 5, when you're not showing up at every social scene, when you're not the face in the place doing XYZ? Who do people know you? Who do people know when the cameras are off? Who do people see when there's no microphone in front of you? In other words, how are you doing even when those people aren't there, when it's just you, yourself, and what the song say, me, myself, and I, when it's just you, or like Michael Jackson said, when you're the man or the woman in the mirror. And so I wanted to just wrap that up, but here's the second hot take: who's checking on the strong friend? That's the biggest question I have for us today. You're the strong friend. Who is checking on you? Check on your strong friends, in other words. But if you're the strong friend that I'm talking to, or the strong daughter, if you're the strong son, if you're the strong father, if you're the strong mother, one question this story raises is, who checks on the strong father? Who checks on the strong husband? Who checks on the strong frat brother, the strong friend everyone is depending on? And so in reality, the people who appear the strongest are often carrying sometimes the heaviest emotional load. They're the ones everyone depends on. Oh, let me call up this person because I know they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to come through to me. And so they're getting the calls throughout the day or even in the midnight hour. Let me check in on this person and ask them for something because I know that they will come through for me because they've always come through for me. And so before you know it, it's like taking a trip. And we know that when you're getting on an airplane, they have weight limits on the luggage. The weight on some of these people that are walking around in this world, they're at capacity. They're paying luggage fees, the overweight fees on their luggage, right? Because, and again, this is just me looking, just from a distance, but many times people may not have learned how to develop healthy boundaries, right? And what that can look like. But I'm not going to stay there. What I would say is these individuals have become strong for a good reason, because they are dependable, because they are leaders, because they have the capacity to do things that sometimes people maybe haven't formed or found it within themselves. And they just excel at what they do, right? It's not a crime to do something exceedingly well. It's not a crime to do your job and do it to the best of your ability. It is not a crime to live in a space of excellence. All right. I just want to normalize that for a second. But here's the where I take a step back. It's when we're in these spaces of excellence and we're going above and beyond, and the burden falls on us or on you. How do we draw that line to know that I'm doing the most, or I'm overexerting, or I'm overcompensating, or I'm overextending myself? And so, whether it's leading, whether you're producing, whether you're caring for others, and maybe overly meeting expectations from the outside, they look like the well put together young man or the well put together woman. On the outside they look like nothing is going wrong. On the outside they look like they can juggle so many different responsibilities. They look resilient, they look dependable, they look as if, nothing can go wrong. But strength can sometimes become a mask that hides the exhaustion. It can sometimes become the mask that hides the loneliness, it hides the grief, it hides the anxiety or unresolved pain. And so we often assume that because someone is successful, again, whether they're influential, whether they're our mayor, whether they are this and are that, it looks like they're holding it all together. They must be okay. And sometimes I wonder, like, man, who is the pastor to the pastor? Who is the therapist to the therapist? In fact, like, who is the guide to the one that is guiding others? If you want to start entering into the chat religion for a moment, man, even Jesus had to take a step back and turn to the Father. He needed someone. And so in these moments, like, success is not just that barometer of, man, we're doing well, we're resilient, but it can also be an indicator of support. Like, you're successful in this area, but how can you get support in the areas that may be lacking? And so this week's story, this week's headline, it reminds us to look beyond the public image. It reminds us that this could happen and befall upon anyone, whether you're a politician, whether you're starting out your career, whether you're a college student, whether you're a student athlete. You could be a CEO of a company. You can be the pastor. You are a parent. You can be the friend who never misses a beat. And so the reality is, we should not confuse performance. And this is what I think the world does so well. They're performing well, but it doesn't equate to well-being. I can perform well and still have poor mental health. I can perform well and still feel disconnected from who I'm talking to. I can perform well and be in a room full of people and feel the loneliest. Two things can be true at the same time. And so the question isn't simply, how are you doing? Yeah, we want to ask people, oh, how are you doing? How's it going? Today's question is, who's creating space for you to be honest about how you're feeling? Who's creating space for you to be honest about how you're really doing? Not just the surface, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm all right. Did I say that right? I'm all right. But really, truly, to be vulnerable and safe, that says, today I missed the mark. Today wasn't a good day. Today, like, it was heavy. And if I don't do something constructive, I'm going to crash out, But who's creating that space? And that's a bigger conversation, because there are people that want to share, but have we created the safety? Have we created the space that is not full of judgment, that's full of shame? Here's my gripe. People trying to give you a sermon when you really just need a hug. People are trying to evangelize to you in your deepest, darkest moments, and they just need some reassurance that everything is going to be okay. So there's a time and a place for everything. And so here's our call to action. This week, check on your strong friend, please. I want you to pull out your phone after this segment, and I want you to identify one or two quote unquote strong friends. And if you don't have friends, maybe it's the strong coworker. Maybe it's your boss. If you don't have a boss, think about your parents. But the idea is check on someone that you would perceive to be a strong individual and reach out to them. Encourage them. Not so much asking them to solve a problem for you, but maybe reframing it in a way of, well, how can I solve a problem for you today? You're always solving someone's problem. How can I solve a problem for you? And they may say, oh, I'm fine. I got it. No, we got to bring them back to reality. No, you don't. In a gentle way. No, right now, I want to lift the burden from you. What can I do? And make sure if we're doing this, it's something that we can handle, so that we don't just take it on and we know it's more than we can chew. So make sure it's bite-sized for what we can handle. And if you're the strong friend, remember this today. You don't have to carry everything alone. I'll say that again. You don't have to carry everything alone. I'll say that one more time. You don't have to carry everything alone. Asking for help. It's not a sign that you're falling apart. It's not a sign that you don't have everything together. It's not a sign of weakness. Asking for help may be the strongest thing that you do. I wish I can stay and talk some more, but I'll catch you on the other side. Bye for now.